So this is a from Chaos, from Professor Chaos, is a do not try not to cry challenge. All right. So as I am not like purely like because this is probably the first time I've done like a reaction stream like this before. I am going to pause frequently and make comments simply because I am acutely aware of the thing of people just reusing videos and reacting to them, but not actually saying anything about them as free content, and is a big problem. So, just be aware of that. Oh, and this is by SCP Explained Story and Animation. So.
Many forms and bears many faces, like a demon walking among us. It takes over your life, crawling in and changing you from the inside out. Breaking an addiction is hard, but oftentimes not giving it up is much harder. That was a difficult lesson to learn for three people: Joey Walker, Dolly McGregor, and Paul Abels. These three had never met one another, and now they never will. But each one of them had two things in common. First was that each had an addiction they felt like they couldn't shake, and second was that they each had a run-in with SCP-666.
So yeah, addiction's very strong and very hard to break. It's one of the reasons my family has a heavy let me actually
Joey,
there we go. My family has heavy addictive personalities. Even including my mother. So not only the fact that I do not have the money to indulge in a vice, I know that if I were to give myself that, it would be hard to shake. So I have purposely gone out of my way to not have like smoking or drinking or anything of that nature, or God forbid worse. But yeah, my whole family deals with, especially drinking and smoking, pretty heavily. Even my mother is actually attempting to. She actually quit smoking for a long time, and then she got back into it, and then unfortunately she hasn't escaped it since, even though she's tried multiple times. So I wish her the best. I really do.
Walker was at the end of his rope when he encountered it. Everyone has bad days, but for Joey, every day for the last 15 years has been a bad day. He was pushing 40 with nothing to show for it, except credit card debt, a scraggly beard, and a beat-up old Mustang. But booze had always been there for him.
There we go. Uh-oh.
No matter how bad things got, he could always count on a glass full of comfort at the end of the day. But to paraphrase a quote by Stephen King, sometimes when a man takes a drink, the drink takes the man.
Takes the man. There's that's a good quote. One of my there's a song by Stupendium about Alan Wake 2, which I managed to break my addiction to soda. Nice. Good for you. There's a song by Stupendium for Alan Wake 2, which is a game I would be interested in. But there's a line in it that goes, "Every artist wants to pour themselves into their work. But be careful. You might not like what you find at the bottom of the bottle."
And Joey Walker had been long since taken. He was a transient worker, doing jobs wherever jobs needed doing. But he never expected that he would end up all the way to Tibet working construction. Not that he was complaining. Sure, it was cold, but there was plenty of Tibetan Chang to enjoy. It was a drink so good that legends even say that Yetis would raid villages in the mountains just to get a little taste.
That's cool. I like that. I might fucking use that as in a story. I like that.
The Chang. And it was what he had been drinking when he crashed his car up in the mountains, leaving him stranded in the snow.
Oh,
Joey
shit.
had survived the crash itself, but he knew he wouldn't last long in the cold. He needed shelter. That's why he felt like he could hardly believe his luck when he first saw the yurt, a kind of traditional Tibetan tent made from animal skins. Joey had never seen anything quite like it, but any refuge from the storm would do. He pushed forward through the snow and climbed inside. But the inside of the yurt was nothing like the outside. In fact, it seemed like an exact replica of his favorite sports bar back in Atlantic City. It was warm. There was all the old memorabilia on the walls. And every screen was showing the Saints wiping the floor with the Colts in the 2010s.
Yeah, no, I'd immediately be suspicious, 100%. Like, that's...
He just smiled and approached the bar. He even recognized the bartender, Malcolm, a good old friend of his. Malcolm smiled back at him, but there was something oddly menacing in his grin. "Welcome back," he said. "I thought you'd hauled your sorry keister off to Tibet. Guess you gave up on that too, just like everything else." "Well, except..." Malcolm pushed a glass of beer towards him across the bar and glared. Joey didn't understand why Malcolm was being so aggressive, but he didn't question that either. He grabbed the glass and drank it up, guzzling it down.
I'd question every bit of this.
Glass down on the bar. Malcolm kept the drinks coming, round after round, and Joey kept knocking them back. He didn't notice when the TV screens turned to static. He didn't notice when the other patrons at the bar began to jitter and twitch, turning little by little into something less than human. He didn't even notice when Malcolm's face started melting off his skull, as long as he kept pouring. Before he could even really understand what was happening to him, Joey Walker was dead. His liver and kidneys had given out on him. His corpse would later be found frozen on the Tibetan mountainside, just 30 feet away from his crashed car.
Wow.
The coroner's report would list his cause of death as accidental, but this was no accident. He'd fallen victim to SCP-666, an anomalous yurt known to some as the Spirit House. The being he'd call Malcolm is known to the Foundation as SCP-666-1, and Joey had failed its challenge. Sadly for our inebriated friend, the penalty for failure is death. Next on our list of human tragedies comes Dolly McGregor, a 62-year-old woman from Anaheim, California. Dolly was never averse to the drink, but she knew how to enjoy her mojitos in moderation. You rarely get to 62 if
she's a gambler.
And Dolly could tell people with pride that she had 2 children and 6 grandchildren.
Wow, good family, good family.
Often enough for her liking. She also had over $100,000 in gambling debt owed to a number of casinos on the Vegas Strip. Ever since her husband Albert had passed away several years prior, shooting craps, playing blackjack, and willing away the hours in front of the slot machines had been a welcome change from...
It was an addiction to it.
But in Vegas, fortunes can change in an instant. Dolly had gone from being on a hot winning streak to losing everything.
I think it resets the
credit until she was gambling with money she'd never be able to pay back. But that didn't stop her. She'd been selling off everything, even remortgaging the house that Albert had built with his own 2 hands to try and keep up with her ballooning debts. Still, it wasn't enough. But she couldn't stop either. It wasn't even that she felt good about it anymore. It was just that she only ever felt normal among the flashing lights of slot machines and the clatter of dice.
Yeah, that's how addiction gets you.
As far away as possible. She heard about people reaching spiritual enlightenment in Tibet. They'd discover God, or gods, or sometimes just a sense of inner peace. Whatever it was, she needed to find it and get this demon off her back.
So it only shows up in Tibet.
Savings and flew off to Tibet to clear her head. She didn't know if there were any casinos in Lhasa, but if there were, her money would surely be no good there. It was exactly what she needed. But Tibet wasn't the promised land she thought it would be. Wherever Dolly went, there she was, with the same vices and demons chasing her. The first night she spent in Lhasa, she used the hotel Wi-Fi to download an online poker app.
Of course she did.
This culminated in another couple $1,000 lost, and a panic attack that caused Dolly to throw her phone into her toilet before wandering off into the wilderness. She just needed to get away. But time and space got away from her, and eventually she was knee-deep in snow. Where had she come from? Where could she go?
Cotton Eye Joe.
It dawned on her that if she didn't find some kind of shelter soon, she'd be done for. But all she could do was keep walking. That's when she happened upon SCP-666. The yurt was like an oasis on the barren mountainside. She didn't expect comfort inside, but it could at least provide her some shelter until the staff back at the hotel noticed she was gone. Then they'd come and save her, right?
No.
Right.
No.
But when she passed through the yak leather flap into the yurt, Dolly wasn't in an ancient tent in the Tibetan wilderness. She was on a casino floor. There was a big, beautiful roulette table before her, attended to by a grinning, well-dressed croupier. They were flanked by an army of slot machines, and all the pleasing, familiar sounds of cheerful gambling rang out through the air. She approached the table, and
it's all designed to make you do it more.
Like disappointment. Back again, eh, Dolly? He said with a sigh. Of course, I should have expected it. After all, what else do you have in that empty little life of yours, Without all this, you'd be nothing, right? Nothing at all. Since Albert died and the kids want nothing to do with you, we're all you've got. So
damn.
What'll it be? Red or black? Are you feeling lucky? His words wounded Dolly, but that wouldn't stop her. She grabbed her chips and put them all on red. One last spin couldn't hurt. What did she have to lose?
Damn.
She blinked, and she wasn't sitting at the table anymore. She was upright, but she wasn't standing. Her wrists and ankles were bound to something, to a wheel. A giant roulette wheel, like it was some kind of medieval torture device. The croupier was standing across from her. Well, something that used to be a croupier. His face was flickering in and out. Sometimes it was human, sometimes it was a mass of eyes and teeth. More demons were sitting all at the slot machines behind him, pulling levers made from human bones. Good choice, Dolly, the croupier said. Red suits you. He reached out and gave the wheel a spin. Dolly was lost in an overwhelming, pulsing cascade of lights, colors, and sounds. The horrific, tinny noises of slot machines and the laughter of the demonic croupier. She was lost in panic and terror as she just kept spinning and spinning.
It reminds me of... This reminds me of the movie The Devil's Carnival. That was a good movie. Good musical.
Body was eventually found. Her muscles were in the advanced stages of atrophy, as though she hadn't been moving for years. Her brain was rotted, and the cause of death was determined as sudden cardiac arrest after an extended period of sleep deprivation and malnutrition.
Oh, goodness.
Dolly's family would never really know what happened to her.
Shame.
The SCP Foundation has learned a lot about SCP-666 after containing it in Site-73. Its anomalous effects, namely vivid, complex, and potentially fatal hallucinatory experiences, only affect those with some kind of addiction or dependency. To anyone else entering the yurt, it's just a normal tent, but any addicts who enter will fall under its spell, and are generally transported back to the place where their addiction was at its strongest. There they'll encounter SCP-666-1, an entity that takes the form of a figure from the subject's life, normally one heavily involved in facilitating their addiction. Any kind of to trigger it. Alcohol, drugs, gambling, pornography, food, self-destructive behavior, even video games.
Oh, shit.
SCP-666 kills its victims with a twisted mockery of the very thing that they were dependent on in life. It was only with Paul Abels that the Foundation started discovering the other side of the coin. By almost all accounts, Paul is a worse person than anyone on this list. He got addicted to hard drugs early on in life, and took up a life of violent crime to support his habit. He murdered 2 people during a liquor store robbery before being convicted and sentenced to death. He'd then been picked up as a D-class by the SCP Foundation and selected as a test subject for SCP-666 due to his history of drug abuse. The Foundation expected to be adding his body to the incineration pile sometime soon. None of the researchers working on the case predicted what actually ended up happening. Paul was forced to enter the yurt. Not long after, he found himself standing in a place he'd done everything to try to forget. The dark, graffiti-stained alley where he'd been sold his first hit. This was the place that destroyed his life. Every bad decision he'd ever made could be traced back to here, and specifically to one man, Frank. Frank was his first dealer, and now here he was, standing right across from him once more. Frank was grinning like a demon.
Come on, Polly, he said. You gotta trash. We both know what you're gonna do. Don't you feel it? The itch? Come on, one more hit, Polly. That's all you need to feel better. It's time to take your medicine.
Frank, or this thing pretending to be Frank, was right. He did feel the itch. He did want
I like this demon,
Maybe
though.
He was no better than this. He began to reach out towards Frank, but then he abruptly pulled his hand back. Frank's eyes widened in genuine surprise as Paul replied, "I'm sorry, that's not me anymore." SCP-666-1 gave a smile and said,
Maybe it isn't, Polly. Maybe it isn't.
when Paul Abels was removed from the SCP-666 yard by one of the attending guards, the Foundation researchers discovered something amazing. Paul was very much alive. More incredibly, he didn't feel the cravings anymore. His addiction was gone. And further tests showed that Paul wasn't a one-off event. In fact, anyone who denies the temptation of SCP-666 will see their addictions miraculously disappear when they finally leave. After this, it became clear to the Foundation that SCP-666 isn't just a way to punish addicts. It's a kind of test. Those who want to change, who are willing to truly confront their demons and resist the pull of temptation, are rewarded with the one thing they want most in their life: freedom from their addiction. SCP-666 can be your doom or your salvation. And like most things in life, you get what you give. Now check out SCP-610, The Flesh That Hates, and SCP-1730, What Happened to...
Alright, so, again, as a reminder, this is a Try Not to Cry challenge. All of these have been given, linked to us by Professor Chaos. They're all by the same people. They're all by SCP Explained Story and Animation. And this is 1230, A Hero is Born.
Is it that makes a person a hero? Is it a trait that you're born with? Something that you can inherit, passed down from generation to generation? Is someone still a hero if they never save a life but improve the lives of the people that matter to them? Do you really need a magic hammer, an enchanted suit of armor, or a tragic origin?
Wait, hold on. Pause. Isn't that from Dark Souls 2?
Or a tragic origin story in order to become a hero? Or can you still be heroic as an ordinary, everyday person through the simplest of kind deeds? Maybe it only takes a few moments in a lifetime to be a hero. Moments when you are given the chance to overcome adversity or conquer a personal flaw. Perhaps learning how to deal with defeat.
Hey, whoa!
Or conquer a personal flaw.
That's Frank! That's Frank! Right there, that's Frank! On the left! Frank's back!
How to deal with defeat and get back up after, rather than learning how to never be defeated, is the essence of heroism. We can all be heroes, every single one of us. And in a way, we already are. Everyone is the hero of their own story.
Also true.
If you want any further proof of that, then maybe you should take SCP-1230. An unassuming book is presented to you. Its hardcover is dark green, but other than that, there is absolutely nothing remarkable about it that you can notice. But little do you know, this book that you hold in your hands is none other than SCP-1230. So what's inside? Surely it must be an important anomalous artifact if the SCP Foundation has an interest in it. Perhaps it's filled with ancient spells, or a mathematical formula to calculate the exact mass of the fabric of reality. No, if you're expecting every page to be full, you'd be disappointed. In fact, only the first page you open in the book will have anything written on it. The rest will appear blank.
Okay.
This can change depending on which page you open first, resetting every time the book is closed again. However, the phrase you will find written on that page will always stay the same. When opening SCP-1230, you will see the words, "A hero is born." What happens after you read these words? Well, not much, at least not right away. In fact, you won't notice any active effects after reading SCP-1230 for quite some time, until that is, you fall asleep. And as you sleep, you begin to dream. Now, most dreams are pretty disjointed.
Yeah,
sometimes
agreed.
Fragments of memories or your
They're
deepest,
wild.
most
Mine
random
are
thoughts.
absolutely
Of course, other
nuts.
times it's a fear, a long-held, deep-rooted phobia or manifestation of anxiety brought to the surface
I constantly have
of a nightmare,
dreams
only
where my
to be
teeth
forgotten
fall out,
by the time you've
and
woken up.
it's
Perhaps that's why so many people
strange.
look for the deeper meaning to their dreams, to get a better understanding of themselves. But this dream is different, far more vivid and memorable, with a meaning that is a lot easier to discern. In this dream, you find yourself as the hero of your own story. The protagonist
Adventure
of a
time!
fantastical adventure. It's more than an ordinary dream. It looks, sounds, smells, feels as real as the ordinary world you know. You will find yourself at the center of a fantasy world, where you are the hero destined to aid this troubled land, to bring peace and save the world. The fantasy you find yourself in is different depending on who you are.
Oh, okay.
It's a dreamscape that has been tailor-made for your enjoyment, and your epic quest awaits on the path laid out in front of you. But where do these bespoke fantasy adventures come from? Does the SCP-1230 book itself bestow these dreams on a reader? Or is there some other force at play that creates worlds where the dreamer is the hero? Well, actually, yes there is. And his name is the Bookkeeper, or SCP-1230-1. He looks exactly as you would imagine him to, an old man adorned in a dark green cloak, with a long beard sometimes appearing to dreamers in order to guide them. Picture Gandalf from the Lord of the Rings books, but instead of the gray or the white, the Bookkeeper is Gandalf the Green. In every dream caused by SCP-1230, the Bookkeeper appears as the personification of the book itself, often aiding dreamers, willingly offering them counsel, guidance, and help on their fantastical quests. In an experiment to test the range of SCP-1230's anomalous properties, an SCP Foundation researcher opened the book and then boarded a domestic flight, spending the night in a hotel in his hometown. Even miles away from the book, the researcher still experienced a fantastical dream, and during this dream he was approached by SCP-1230-1. The Bookkeeper was happy to explain the workings of the book, describing how SCP-1230 implanted a dream in the reader's subconscious mind from the moment they saw the phrase, "A hero is born."
Wow, why? Okay, so how does this get tragic?
With the ability to manipulate what he described as fantasy-scapes, and that he enjoyed doing this, aiming to sculpt these fantastical dreams in such a way that the dreamer experiencing them would get the most enjoyment out of being the hero of their own story. Thanks to the Bookkeeper, the length of the dreams vary. They could be quick, only lasting 45 seconds, or seem to last as long as 200 years from the dreamer's point of view. However, in the real world, the person experiencing the Bookkeeper's fantasy-scape would only actually be asleep for an average duration of time. SCP-1230
so for me it'd be like 10, 12 hours.
Beings with the capacity for imagination. In other words, only human beings are affected by the book and are able to enter their own bespoke fantasy.
Interesting. Because we do know dogs can dream.
Arm to open SCP-1230, the pages remain blank, leaving the Bookkeeper to explain to a subsequent dreamer that only beings who can dream may find the phrase, "A hero is born" within. Most animals or any machines that view the book will not experience its effects at all. So what can a person do within the fantasy-scapes of these dreams? Is it an open sandbox to do anything and everything you can think of? Or do these fantastical realms have their own rules? Well, for
that's a good
start,
question.
They do seem to be completely safe spaces. During testing, the Foundation conducted a number of experiments that involved getting members of D-Class personnel to read SCP-1230 and test the limitations of the dream worlds the Bookkeeper created for them. Why use D-Class personnel to test out something seemingly as harmless as SCP-1230?
Well, because nothing is as harmless as that.
The Foundation wanted to know if a person could die in one of these dreams.
Oh, shit.
One test involved ordering a D-Class to immediately find a way to terminate himself once he found himself inside the dream world. He awakened after only 45 seconds of being asleep, and described being at the peak of a volcano called the Ashen Spire.
Good name.
Within
Good
the
name.
dream, the test subject had been sent on a quest to recover a sword known as Calidus, the Blessed Blade. He said these names had come to him as if he had known them all along. Following the Foundation's orders, the D-Class attempted to throw himself into the volcano before him, only to wake up moments later after feeling intense heat, but suffering no adverse effects in the real world. During the following experiment, another D-Class was told to try and injure himself in the fantasy-scape, but not a fatal injury. The subject awoke after 6 hours of sleep, feeling a numbed pain in the same place he had attempted to harm himself. But this sensation was never intense. In fact, it was barely noticeable. In his dream, the D-Class said that he had conversed with the Bookkeeper, who had shown concern that the man was trying to cause himself injury, but thanked him for not terminating himself immediately like the other rude fellow that had preceded him. So, all of this sounds pretty great.
Yeah. Yeah, what's the tragedy? I'm waiting for it.
A fantasy adventure in which
I would love
the
this.
hero of their own bespoke story.
Yeah.
What could possibly be the downside? Well, the downside is this. What if someone preferred their fantasy the real world? Now comes the unfortunate story of a professor working for the SCP Foundation. A lifelong fan of tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons,
Yep.
the professor filled a request for access to SCP-1230, and it was granted. He was apparently shaking with pure excitement. After reading A Hero is Born in the book, he didn't even wait until later to go to sleep, instead opting to doze off right then and there at the desk where he had read it. The professor had
That's
spent
funny.
15 entire hours asleep.
Wow.
Concern had begun to spread among the other researchers. He remained sleeping, living out his own fantasy adventure for a further 9 hours.
Wow.
Spending a total of 24 hours in the dream world that the bookkeeper had made for him. When the professor awoke, he appeared to look around the room confused, unsure of where he was when approached by the Foundation's security personnel. Medical staff examined him and explained where he was, after which the professor seemed to regain his memory. After being reminded who he was, the professor excused himself to the restroom. He didn't emerge, and 15 minutes later a member of the medical team went to check
Oh,
on him.
no.
Sadly, the professor was dead. Scribbled on the nearby bathroom wall was one simple phrase, his last words: "I can't go back to this." Attempting to immediately use SCP-1230 and make contact with the bookkeeper, another doctor tried to find the "A Hero is Born" phrase within the pages of the book. However, instead the pages were soaking wet, and on every single page, the same message: "I am so sorry. I never intended for this to happen. I just wanted to make people happy." For 3 weeks, the book stayed like this until the same doctor placed a sticky note inside SCP-1230 that said, "I'd like to talk to you, if that's all right." That night, the doctor fell asleep and dreamt of being in a dark void. There was only one source of light in the endless darkness, a street lamp under which he found the bookkeeper, sat in a puddle. The old bearded man was sobbing uncontrollably, his cloak soaking wet with his tears. He explained through his overwhelming sadness what had happened to the professor.
He had such an active imagination. I was able to create a vast and beautiful universe for him, and it was obvious that he wanted a life like that for so long. He conquered foul beasts and rescued princesses. He built kingdoms and even raised a family, but he never wanted to leave. He delved so far into his fantasy world that I soon realized he preferred his dream over the real world. I reminded him that this was all merely an illusion, but he wouldn't listen to me. He stated that if he was ever forced to leave, he would immediately end his life. I tried to keep him happy for as long as I could.
The bookkeeper revealed that, from the professor's point of view, the fantasy life he had lived lasted 200
Oh,
years.
goodness.
As much as the old man had tried to hold on and keep the professor happy for as long as possible, eventually he had to release him from the fantasy scape. And as a result, the professor had ended his own life rather than return to reality. SCP-1230 resumed its normal function a few days later, after the doctor left another note between the pages, offering some friendly advice to the bookkeeper. Now it sits quietly on a bookshelf in the Site-12 library, surrounded by fictional novels. The perfect material to inspire more fantasy scapes in the future.
That's
We
true.
all like to dream that we're the heroes of our own stories. But to quote the bookkeeper himself,
As sweet as dreams may be, eventually we all have to wake up.
Now go check out SCP-1762,
All
where
right.
the dragons went. In
So-
the office in the midst.
That was a good one. That was a good one. I can see why. I was wondering what the tragedy was. I can see why these are in the don't try not to cry challenge that you've given me here, Chaos. I'm not feeling anything quite yet, but I can understand why. Again, SCP Explained Stories and Animation, 3844 to Slay a Dragon. Again, I'm trying to make commentary to not just like sit here and listen, but also I do get kind of wrapped up in the video. And I can't just pause, because every time I pause it like shortens the time until the next commercial, to the next ad, which sucks.
Of the Middle Ages to fantasy novels to popular television shows with horrible last seasons, there is one mystical creature that has stood the test of time
Dragons
again
are
and
fucking
again.
wild,
For almost
man.
as long as human beings have gathered together and shared stories,
Yeah.
the imaginations of countless generations have been captivated by the same image. An
Yeah.
enormous winged reptile soaring through the skies, sometimes depicted as a wise, noble creature, and other times feared as it breathes fire down upon its foes.
Some variation
As long
of
as the
dragons
land
have
and the word
existed
tell
for a
them,
long
there
time.
have always been tales of dragons,
Yeah.
be they benevolent or monstrous. But these are just stories, aren't they? But surely a legend does not survive for so many centuries without a reason. And
Yeah.
with all the other myths
Yeah.
and ancient folklore that the SCP Foundation has found to be true, who's to say that there aren't still dragons somewhere up the mountains? SCP
You've already failed the challenge. I'm
is
so
one
sorry,
such
Chaos.
creature. First discovered in 1906, a creature exactly like the legends described was found to be living in the Dolomites, a mountain range located in northeastern Italy. One of the first to see it was a man named Dr. Lester Fegmont, and he recounted his findings to a friend, Frederick, in a letter that the SCP Foundation keeps on file. This document is one of the first recorded sightings of SCP-3844, and describes how Lester eventually came face to face with the winged beast of legend.
How'd he
Having
survive?
spotted something that they instantly recognized as a dragon, Lester, his associate Galveston,
What
and a
is?
guide
Why
traversed
are
the
the
slopes of
clouds
Dolomite
visible through the
Mountains to
mountains?
find where the creature had made its home. According to the description of the beast in Lester's
Are they supposed to be in
letter,
front of it?
soared over one peak, let out a low roar that loosened the snow from the mountainside and then dived out of sight. Its wings blocked out the sun like a cloud passing overhead. I wish the whole lab could have seen it. After 2 hours, the group arrived at the Dragon's Cavern. From the way Lester described it, the place was like the lair of Smaug, the dragon famously featured in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. The cave was filled to the brim with treasure, and seemed to stretch on deeper into the mountain than the supplies they'd brought with them would allow them to explore. But there was no sign of the creature they had seen flying overhead. Giving up on their search, the group began to leave the treasure-filled cave, preparing to head back down.
Did one of them
out the
take the
mountains
gold?
way they had
Oh.
come. But then, they heard the roar. Still in the dragon's lair, Lester had no idea if the sound had come from in front or behind, until they saw the
echo.
creature outside of the cave's entrance. Lester was terrified, but then he realized something. The dragon wasn't trying to threaten the men. He was trying to welcome the intrepid trio as its guests. SCP-3844 apparently spoke very eloquently to the group, sounding like quite the gentleman according to Lester. It seemed to
Good
possess some
afternoon.
sort of shape-shifting ability, as the letter described the creature changed its form to resemble a young man to make us feel more relaxed. The dragon referred to the group as a new age of knights, and seemed to be very up to speed on the current affairs of 1906. What followed was a lengthy negotiation between Lester and SCP-3844, agreeing on terms that would keep the dragon confined to the Dolomite mountain range and away from the prying eyes of the public.
Okay.
It seemed that the group had been sent in to deal with SCP-3844 on behalf of Italian officials. In his letter, Lester mentioned his uncertainty in placing his trust in the creature, hoping not to be double-crossed, and transcribed the conditions that were agreed upon. The dragon, whose name was apparently Tharnrock, but also was referred to as the Anomaly, was to limit the amount of times it ventured out of its cave to only once per day, and keep its flights within the area of the Dolomites. Tharnok was also advised to refrain from roaring or vocalizing whenever it left its lair. In return, Lester and his Anomaly Investigation Foundation would send an ambassador to confer with the dragon once a week, and punish anyone who attempted to steal any valuable artifacts from the creature's hoard of treasure. Lastly, the nation of Italy swore to encourage its citizens to avoid traveling to the Dolomite Mountains, and would publicly discredit any eyewitness reports, denying Tharnrock's existence. Many years passed, and Dr. Lester Fegmont rose through the ranks of the SCP Foundation, eventually becoming known as O5-2, a member of the infamous O5 Council.
Yeah, cool.
SCP-3844 was kept confined to the same area within the Dolomites, but the methods of keeping it there began to change. The Foundation set up a perimeter around the area, keeping civilians from entry. They installed anti-aircraft artillery near the cave where Tharnrock was first found, to be used against the dragon in the event of a full-scale containment breach. Researchers were sent in to study the creature, taking temperature and radiation readings, testing SCP-3844's IQ, and providing it with magazines on science, nature, and current affairs as reading material.
Nice.
The Foundation learned that SCP-3844, much like the dragons of legend, was able to breathe fire. Or more accurately, the beast could expel a vapor of methane from its mouth and then ignite this gas via unknown means. Tharnrock could speak at least 7 languages, and claimed it could mimic the form of any human. The contents of the dragon's lair was estimated to be worth almost 13.4 million United States dollars.
Jesus.
It was learned that SCP-3844 would burrow underneath the treasure when it slept. If those traits sound familiar, that's because they are all reoccurring ideas that feature in the various legends of dragons from throughout the ages. In fact, SCP-3844 claimed to have been the inspiration behind many European myths that revolved around dragons. It even asserted that it had been the model for the Welsh flag, which depicts a red dragon in its center. From time to time, 05-2 would still visit his old friend SCP-3844 for chats in the Dragon's Cave. During one of their conversations, the Dragon and 05-2 discussed some of the many scientific advancements human beings had made over the years, which SCP-3844 learned about through the reading material it had been provided. How long had you known about the nature of light? SCP-3844 asked, to which Dr. Fegmont replied, decades at least. The Dragon also asked about what it called the inner workings of our smallest building block, and 05-2 explained that mankind had split the atom during the Second World War. SCP-3844 then asked if science could explain his kind, expressing a longing to stretch his wings again and leave the confines of his cave. 05-2 denied the Dragon's request, claiming that advancements in radar technology posed a potential risk to SCP-3844 if it was allowed to take flight again. He offered to at least find a way to make the Dragon's home bigger and more comfortable before he bid the creature farewell. As they parted, both said that they hoped to see each other again, which they would, but only one final time. When they met, for what would be the last time, 05-2 returned to the cave at SCP-3844's request. The Dragon was surprised to see that Lester was still alive after so many years, and hadn't succumbed to old age and death the way most humans do. The doctor explained that as a member of the 05 Council, he was kept in pristine condition through thaumaturgy and temporal technology. The Dragon described it as magic, and 05-2 argued that everything in the world can be explained with science if one examines for long enough. SCP-3844 agreed, although appeared defeated by this admission. It asked Lester to explain what he thought the stars to be, and the doctor naturally gave a scientific answer. Balls of flaming gas. If you want me to be more specific, I could list their chemical components. The Dragon was already aware of this thanks to its reading material. He then asked, do you know what a duke once told me many years ago when I asked him the same thing? He said, they're little lights from the heavens. His voice spoke with awe, much like yours when we first met. At first, 05-2 thought that the creature was grieving over the advancements humanity had made in science, and how it allowed them to better understand the world. But SCP-3844 grieved for the death of spectacle, the death of the belief in miracles. I wish I could embrace science, but it takes away so much of what I enjoy about this world of ours. The beast lamented. Before adding, it appears I'm allergic to the stuff. Learning about the world around it in such detail had robbed SCP-3844 of its enjoyment of the world. Knowing everything could be explained by and reduced to science saddened the Dragon, losing the wonder that comes from not knowing all the answers.
That's not entirely true anymore in this universe because SCPs exist, which is weird.
It wanted to break the agreement it had made with Dr. Fegmont all those years ago. 05-2 tried to argue with the beast, to convince the Dragon to stay in its lair. But Thunderrock had not felt the wind beneath its wings in over 100 years, and longed to be with others of his kind. You seem quite confident. 05-2
I don't even know if they are.
Dragon announced its intention to once again fly freely. Confidence is all I have left. I don't want to believe that the world doesn't need its whimsy anymore. Sadly, Thunderrock's flight was not to last. As dictated by the Foundation's special containment procedures, SCP-3844 was neutralized, shot down by the anti-aircraft guns that were positioned around its cavern. The ancient noble creature was no more, killed for wanting to be free, but longing to believe the world could still be a place filled with wonder. Curiously, the remains of the Dragon that the SCP Foundation recovered seemed to, in actual fact, be those of a Dracovolans, a non-anomalous species of lizard colloquially known as the common flying dragon. These remains were kept under observation by the Foundation's research personnel, and the cave where SCP-3844 had spent most of its life was to be inspected every 72 hours for any signs of anomalous activity. But somehow, through means still inexplicable to the Foundation, the entrance to the cave seemed to disappear almost entirely. The area where
the wonder
SCP-3844
disappeared.
had been found and was then kept prisoner no longer contained a cavern. The lair filled with riches, gems, and valuables had vanished. In its place was a small hole, and behind it, dragons. Ever since the death of Tharnok, the designation of SCP-3844 has been reassigned to a collection of large winged reptiles that reside deep within a number of mountains all over the world. The SCP Foundation received multiple confirmed reports of these creatures living in the Himalayas, the Rockies, the Appalachians, the Andes, and the Dolomite Mountain ranges, where the very first instance of SCP-3844 had been discovered, all the way back in 1906. Being the most familiar with Tharnok, O5-2 was assigned to investigate the sudden appearance of these creatures, and tasked with the challenge of containing them. Tharnok had been slain, killed by the Foundation for wanting nothing more than to be free in a world of wonder and intrigue. However, one thing seemed clear. He was not the only one of his kind. Rest assured, and don't mourn too much for Tharnok. There are still dragons living in the mountains. Now go check out SCP-17.
Good. That one almost got me. I'm gonna be real with you. That one got close. That one got close. Now, I'm gonna be real with you. I know I've seen this one, I think, A Gift from Dad, if I remember correctly. This one might get me, considering building on from the last one. This one might get me, Chaos. This one might get me.
Childhood and ask yourself, what was the most pain you've ever felt while growing up? As we develop, our understanding of pain evolves according to our different experiences. The older we get, the injuries we suffered as children, like a scraped knee or a bee sting, rarely cause us the same level of distress as they used to.
Yeah, because the world's no longer new to us. The sensations are new.
What you really need in that moment straight after you've fallen off your bike or tripped playing soccer is someone to pick you back up and give your sore spot a kiss. Perhaps you even need a bowl of warm soup to comfort you. Luckily for you, SCP-348 is exactly that. While many of the anomalies held in containment by the SCP Foundation have earned the Euclid or infamous Keter class designation,
They changed the... There was a... I don't remember if it happened or not, but there was a discussion about changing the way that SCPs were designated, so it's not just Euclid or safe anymore. So I think that's how it's done now. I think they changed it because it is now a 4-phase thing about how dangerous is it, how easy it is to contain, if it escaped, what is the level of disaster that would occur. And then I think there's a fourth thing, and I don't remember what it is. Which is, I think, is a much smarter way of doing it, because there are things that are that this is insanely dangerous, but if it escaped, it wouldn't be any more dangerous than it would be if it didn't escape, right? But also, this is a world-ending event, but it's super easy to contain, right? So there's, being able to describe those things in that way is really smart. And I think, if I remember correctly, they did change it up. So I don't know what the community feels like after the people have suggested it, but I've seen there's another SCP YouTuber that I watch called Volgrim, and I think he does the newer. When I say new, I mean it's the last 4 or 5 years. But he does the newer containment levels.
This is no containment risk, and in that it wouldn't hurt a fly. It is neither an ancient eldritch abomination from another dimension spreading its influence in our world through mimetic stimuli, nor is it a recording of a basketball game in which all the players and spectators are trapped inside.
Oh.
It isn't an indestructible limb-generating reptile or a towering winged being wielding a flaming sword and guarding the entrance to the Garden of Eden. To put it simply, SCP-348 is a bowl. A white ceramic bowl, the kind you would find almost anywhere in the world. It may even look indistinguishable from the one in your kitchen cabinet. Of course, SCP-348 is hardly as ordinary as it outwardly appears to be, and it certainly isn't the only inanimate object that the Foundation keeps safely stored.
Here be dragons.
The key thing that differentiates SCP-348 from most other anomalies is how genuinely harmless it is. Its anomalous properties do not cause injury to any individual that interacts with it, nor does this bowl have any adverse effects on the world around it. SCP-348 cannot bend or reshape reality. It does not cause the person eating from it to have premonitions of their own death, and using it certainly does not manifest a contract-making entity at the opposite side of the table. So what makes this bowl in any way anomalous?
One of the SCPs I really like is the butler.
Not just a harmless piece of fine crockery. Well, why don't we start with how SCP-348 was first discovered? Some time ago, the SCP Foundation was made aware of rumors surrounding a child living in an unknown part of the world. According to the intelligence gathered by the Foundation, this child seemed to possess some sort of healing ability, or at least, this is what rumors suggested. Upon further investigation, the source of these so-called remarkable recovery abilities wasn't the child, but appeared to come from a small ceramic bowl, which we now know as SCP-348.
Yeah, I don't know what the characters on it are, but I know they say what it is eventually.
Natural healing properties, and it doesn't impart any regenerative power to those that eat from it either. It does heal in a certain sense, but not in the way you're probably imagining. When the SCP Foundation recovered SCP-348, there were no markings on it indicating where the bowl came from or who it was manufactured by.
I wonder if it can be broken, but I wouldn't want to test that.
Patterns that appeared to be hand-painted around both the inside and outside of SCP-348. The ceramic surface also bore the Chinese letters Shang Xin Li, which translates to the phrase, thinking of you.
Aww,
the child that first
that's
discovered
sweet.
it found the ceramic bowl in the attic of their home. The child's parents were both full-time workers and seemed to be somewhat neglectful of their child, although they refused to comment on this. But according to the findings of the SCP Foundation, the child had come to rely on SCP-348. Deciding to further investigate the anomalous properties of SCP-348, the Foundation began testing it, given that the child who first discovered the bowl had relied upon it. Tests involve Foundation researchers presenting certain children to SCP-348 and observing the results. So was this bowl haunted? Perhaps harboring some malicious spirit or entity that sought to corrupt these children, maybe even healing them in order to somehow use them as a vessel to break into our world. No. And while it may have not healed in any overt or expected way, it did heal in at least a metaphorical sense. If presented with an
that's a plot point that I want to take now.
Form of minor ailments such as a cut or a runny nose, SCP-348 fills with warm soup. And yes, that's right. We said soup. What kind, you may ask? Well, that seems to vary. Sometimes it is tomato soup. Other times it might be chicken noodle soup.
Oh,
the ingredients
I want
used
that
in the
so
soups
much.
are often different. There are notable consistencies to how SCP-348 heals. If anyone between the ages of 4 years old and 18 years old sits down in front of the blue flowered bowl, the SCP-348 will fill with soup. Numerous young test subjects brought in by the Foundation to eat from this particular bowl of soup have reported that they enjoyed their meal, usually finishing the entire bowl when permitted to by research staff. Many of the injured children that were tested have stated that the soup they eat from SCP-348 reminds them of their parents' cooking. These children have expressed contentment and feelings of comfort after acquiring their various cuts and bruises. Some even claim that even though they were in a room all alone, they didn't feel lonely when they were eating the soup.
Good.
And all the anomalous properties don't end after a child finishes the soup. Usually, although not always, the bowl will leave the child a message, often some brief words of reassurance or comfort.
Aww.
These messages materialize on the inside rim of the bowl and seem to be specifically tailored to the subject that has just eaten. The words will not only be written in the child's first language, but are often linked to the child's home life or relationship with their parents.
Aww.
Messages that appear on SCP-348 usually fade over time, normally disappearing after a few hours, or when the bowl refills with more soup.
It would be so nice to like have more SCPs like this.
Girl, age 8 and suffering from a sore throat, brought before the bowl. According to a background screening made by research personnel, the girl lived with her biological parents and apparently had a good relationship with both her mother and her father. When SCP-348 filled with soup for her, the girl took almost half an hour to finish eating, and afterwards reported that she felt her sore throat get better as she ate. By the end of the meal, this test subject remarked that she felt completely normal. In this instance, no message appeared within the bowl. Another child was brought in to continue the testing of SCP-348, this time a boy of 10. Unlike the previous test, this boy was not on good terms with his parents and often argued with them. At the time of testing, the boy had sustained several minor bruises, the result of a small accident that occurred while the boy had been out riding his bike. Much like the little girl, this subject ate the soup that SCP-348 presented him with. This time, though, the bowl offered a message to the boy. The lettering found on the ceramic surface of SCP-348 simply read, "Don't forget to brush." Messages also appeared when an 11-year-old boy with a slight cold ate soup from the bowl. This child had been adopted by a foster family, and after eating from SCP-348, he saw the message, "I'm glad you're happy," appear. Another young test subject, a boy age 6, had a similar experience. In this instance, the child had several scrapes and scratches from playing with his friends. His parents had divorced, and he was living with his mother at the time of testing. This time, SCP-348's message to this boy read, "I'm sorry, son." A 7-year-old girl suffering from a cough was brought in before SCP.
That one almost got me. That one almost got me. I'll be real with you.
Father to a traffic accident sometime before testing commenced, and received the message, "I love you," after finishing her soup. Further testing conducted by the Foundation revealed that anyone over the age of 18 years who attempted to eat soup from SCP-348 experienced things slightly differently. Unlike the children, older subjects mostly displayed a disinterest in finishing their meal. A common complaint among those over 18 was that the soup was missing something. However, in a few isolated cases, testing SCP-348 on older candidates still revealed messages, although the words seemed to be faded, not the clear hand-painted blue that appeared when the children had finished their soup. One woman aged 30 who was suffering from a headache sat down in front of SCP-348. Much like it had done before, the bowl filled with soup and the woman ate. As with some of the younger subjects, a key aspect of this woman's background seemed to be what triggered the message to appear. Specifically, she admitted to being on bad terms with her mother and father. The woman explained that she had opted to live on her own, isolating herself from her family. In fact, she even described having rejected an offer her father made to her many years earlier, refusing some career training that he was willing to give in order to help her secure a job. When she finished the soup, one word appeared in the bowl: "Why?" Another woman, who was 40 years old, was also brought in for the SCP-348 testing. Much like the previous subject, she had moved away from home and became estranged from her parents over the years. But unlike the previous test, this woman had taken it upon herself to not only send money to her parents, but also arrange senior care for both as well. Prior to testing, her father had died peacefully of natural causes after spending his last days in the care that this woman had paid for. As the woman ate the soup from the bowl, she remarked about its apparently bitter taste, but also described her meal as fulfilling. After she had finished, the words "thank you" appeared within SCP-348. One other adult subject that produced a noticeable result from SCP-348 was a 40-year-old male. The results of this test appeared to be the most distinctly different from any previous adult or child. By now, researchers working for the SCP Foundation had determined that familial history seemed to play an important role in the outcome of any interaction with SCP-348, and this individual was certainly different to most. The man in question had murdered his father roughly a year before the testing took place.
Wow.
He began the test with SCP-348 while afflicted with aches in his back. After one taste of the soup that appeared in the bowl before him, the murderer was immediately repulsed. He complained about the taste, refusing to eat any more from SCP-348. Shortly after, the man began to experience severe stomach pain. The potentially poisonous soup was disposed of, but SCP-348 immediately filled with salt water, which took 3 hours to disappear from the bowl.
Oh, wow.
Despite conducting numerous tests with subjects of all ages and ailments,
That thank you always breaks me.
SCP Foundation researchers have so far been unable to determine the origins of the messages that sometimes appear in SCP-348. Some have theorized because
if I hadn't already seen this one, it probably would have gotten me. Like, I probably would have broken. Like, I'm getting close. I can feel it.
since even when a subject's father is alive or present in their life, the message seems to convey feelings that their father has or would have. Other researchers claim that this is just the purpose of SCP-348, to provide comfort to small children dealing with pain, both inside and out. After all, isn't providing comfort what a good bowl of soup, anomalous or not, is best at? Now check out SCP.
So there is a way to test that. There is a way to test this, but you would need another SCP. I don't remember which one it is. But there's one that forces you to tell the truth. So you could get a child, right? And get one that has a message that allows you to say I'm sorry, right? Like it says I'm sorry. And then you then get their father and then get them to the SCP that forces them to tell the truth and be like, is there something in your life and in the way you treat your child that you are sorry for? Right? Like, being able to... There's a way to test that.
Ever since we took those first steps out of the primordial soup, mankind has long since looked to the
1985.
night sky and dreamed of setting out among the stars. Space is,
I wonder if the
been
Magic
said,
School Bus first came
the
out in
final frontier,
1958.
the vast inky
Almost
void
certainly
that,
not,
for all its
but...
perils, still holds a sense of wonder and calls us to venture out and explore the cosmos. The earliest missions of the space race during the 50s and 60s showed the people of Earth that, while it wasn't easy, the dream of achieving space travel was possible.
We've always
And
looked at the
that dream,
stars, and it's
the
wild.
willingness to chase it is all you really need to get there. Well, that, plus a couple of friends and a Volkswagen microbus.
Okay.
For William, that dream of traveling away from Earth and up to the starry skies...
You haven't seen $49.99, that one will get you. I don't recall.
Up in the 50s, his friends and family all thought of him as a...
They get it, I'll see it.
...who was in deep with a lot of hip counterculture types. William had even dabbled in a few alternative religious groups as well. Most notably practices like the action of transcendental meditation, as well as the teachings of Meher Baba, an Indian spiritual leader who claimed to be God in human form. In other words, William would have been a full-blown hippie in the 60s if he'd only lived long enough to see them. Even now, the idea of taking a summer road trip with a small group of close friends isn't unheard of. And that's almost exactly what William had in mind during the summer of 1958. But with a few key differences. For one, this was set to be a one-way road trip, with zero plans for a return journey. And why? You guessed it. It was because William and his pals wanted to go to outer space. More specifically, they wanted to drive to space. To leave the world behind and cruise all the way out.
Did they think the world was flat or something?
The solar system.
That they could just drive off?
A brand new microbus. A Volkswagen Type 2 Samba bus after pooling money for a down payment with his three friends.
Yeah.
Jerry, Sam, and Susan.
My grandfather had a van that was very similar to a bus, and I wish I could have a van like that, man. There was something about it.
In the hopes of traveling off-world in it. Well, the three had recently been excommunicated from the Fifth Church, a highly secretive New Age religion. Members of the church, or Fifthists, are all about conformity and control. You may remember these eccentric folks from our video on SCP-3512, The More You Know. But William's intention of traveling to space seemed to conflict with the Fifth Church's beliefs, most likely on account of his free spirit defying a group whose two main hobbies were obsessing over patterns and mind control.
Yeah.
The young man believed there was magic up there among the stars, and refused to work a boring 9-to-5 waiting for that magic to come down to Earth.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta go find it yourself.
Jerry, he began to work on modifying the bus. Heaven was up there, and according to William, it was waiting for its angels. It took about 2 months, but Jerry came through.
So,
the engine
hold on.
compartment and cabin of the microbus were now airtight.
Okay.
The section near the rear doors transformed into an airlock. The windows were replaced with shatterproof acrylic, the outer surface treated to withstand any space debris. The gas tank had been replaced with technology decades ahead of its time.
Yeah, what they fucking get it?
The steering wheel, gear shift, handbrake, and pedals all functioned exactly the same.
Okay.
One look at the outer panels of the microbus would have told you what it was and where it was heading. The word Starmobile was sprayed on the inside,
Starmobile.
and the other Alpha Centauri, or bust. The 4th of July rolled around and their Starmobile took flight. William, keeping
How?
a diary of their journey, referred to himself and his friends as the only 4 people in the universe who were truly free, careening upwards at 82 miles per hour without
How?
any police to stop them. No longer restricted by mundane life on Earth, the group traveled higher and higher in their microbus. Their plan was to travel straight to Alpha Centauri, the closest star and planetary system to our own solar system. Thinking their journey would only last a few short weeks, William and his friends waved farewell to Earth.
Jesus.
They thus had everything on board that these intergalactic travelers could possibly need, from bedrolls and pillows to sleep on to enough dehydrated food to feed the 4 of them for 3 whole months in space.
Nice.
There was even room aboard the microbus for Susan's cat Millie, as well as all the comforts of home.
Aw.
William and his friends packed bongos, a guitar, and countless books. But this
Good.
road trip wasn't just an aimless joyride out into the cosmos. The intrepid group had enough supplies with them, and enough ambition to set up the first off-world human colony.
Okay.
They packed a seed bank containing hundreds, if not thousands, of varying seeds.
All
from a
right.
number of
So
common
they actually
domestic
thought
plants
about
from
this.
Earth.
I
On
like
top of
this.
that, there were even frozen egg cells of domestic animals like cats and dogs, and livestock such as cows and pigs.
Huh.
These embryos were all ready to be unfrozen and
Huh.
allowed to grow once the gang reached their destination. However, it didn't take long for problems to start arising. For one, the group quickly ran out of libations within the first 5 days of leaving Earth. Spirits were naturally dampened by the absence of spirits, but William tried to remain optimistic, hoping to grow barley and concoct some homemade brew once they arrived at Alpha Centauri. But while the lack of ale and lager was an inconvenience, there was worse on the horizon.
Yeah.
During a group sing-along, something collided with the Starmobile. Naturally, all aboard were rattled, and it was Jerry who stepped up to calm everyone, stating it was likely just space dust or debris. He opted to take a look outside and see if there had been any damage to the microbus. Donning a homemade spacesuit, Jerry left via the airlock at the rear of the bus and examined, finding no significant harm had been done. But as he was about to make his way back inside, something struck the Starmobile again. The force of it caused Jerry
Yeah.
to lose his grip,
Oh,
sending him
motherfucker.
drifting out into space.
No.
William was the only one at the wheel of the bus, but had never learned to drive. Eventually, he was able to turn the Samba bus around, but it was too late. Jerry was dead, adrift in the cold vacuum. The loss overwhelmed the group, but hit Susan worst of all. She and Jerry had wanted to get married the moment they arrived at Alpha Centauri. William had even obtained a minister's license so he could officiate his friend's wedding that would now never happen. 3 days later, Sam and William awoke to find Susan dead on the floor of the bus. The grief and sorrow had gotten too much for her.
God damn it. Like, it's literally only been like 2 minutes. What the fuck?
She died of a broken heart. Drawing up his guitar and strumming Amazing Grace for his second dead friend, William watched as Sam let Susan's body drift out of the airlock. He wrote in his journal that he hoped she would find Jerry out there in space, and at least they would be together. By now, it had been well over 50 days since the Starmobile had left the safe confines of planet Earth. The group had suffered 2 tragic, heartbreaking casualties already, one by accident and one as a result of the first. And yet, William and Sam, the survivors, were still traveling even deeper into the dark void above, plotting their course to Alpha Centauri as best they could with the hand-drawn star charts they had brought with them. So far, their journey into space had begun with promise and optimism, and was now fraught with dangers and obstacles.
You always want one person to be like, that's not possible. So they can, like, tell you all the reasons why, so you can fix them.
Reach their destination than he and Jerry had first anticipated. Alpha Centauri is roughly 4.5 light years from Earth. Bear in mind that a single light year is equivalent to roughly 6 trillion miles. William was unsure if the microbus had been traveling in the right direction, or if it had even managed to miss the terminus of the journey. The charts Jerry had drawn were of little help. He had been the expert, the one who planned the trip and modified the Volkswagen Type 2 Samba bus for space travel. William was out of his depth, hurtling through the galaxy with little help from his passenger. To make matters worse, both William and Sam had started feeling unwell. Not just travel sick, as you might expect after spending a long ride in a microbus trundling through space.
Yeah.
Their illness wasn't even caused by being trapped in the cramped space for such a long duration of time. Blotches had begun to appear all over their skin, and Sam had been having trouble eating. At random, even a tooth spontaneously fell out of his mouth.
Oh my god.
These aren't symptoms typical of space travel, though. Due to a severe lack of vitamin C in the food they had
Of
packed,
course, they got
the caravan
scurvy.
developed scurvy. Just
Oh.
as it seemed like a trip to Alpha Centauri couldn't have been a bigger disaster, William awoke to see something out of the microbus window. Something he had probably seen hundreds of times in his lifetime, but seeing it now filled him with dread. It was the moon, as in Earth's moon. They were barely close to Alpha Centauri, quickly realizing that they would never reach their destination on their current course due to their grievous errors in calculation. William did the only thing he could. He closed the curtains so that Sam couldn't see how big of a mistake they had made. Eventually, Millie crawled behind the sofa and died. Meanwhile, Sam stopped being able to keep his food down. Towards the end, he could barely so much as see or even sit. Every time he asked his friend if they had arrived yet, William would tell him that they would be there tomorrow. He couldn't bring himself to tell Sam the truth. Finally, Sam asked William to read to him a poem by Dylan Thomas called "And Death Shall Have No Dominion." He was dead before William finished reading. Saddened and filled with remorse, William pushed the last of his friends out.
They didn't even get past the moon.
realizing
Just
that
turn
no one
around.
would be left to push him out whenever he eventually died. The final thought he recorded in his diary came after 2 whole months spent isolated and alone in space before William's death. The last thing he wrote was that the stars looked so beautiful against the dark backdrop of the universe. In spite of the tragedy of his situation, so few others, especially from his time, would ever truly see them like this. Today, the bus is still drifting quietly through space. Now known as SCP-1958, it rests in the orbit of Mars, the withered remains of its driver still sitting at the wheel. William and his friends never made it to Alpha Centauri. In fact, it would have taken them almost 40 million years to reach it. They never saw their dream come to the ending that they had planned. Instead, William, Jerry, Sam, Susan, and Millie the cat all died among the stars, driving their magic bus, their starmobile, out into the unknown. For them, space, that final frontier, had a lot more finality to it. Now go check out How Not to Kill an SCP.
That's a shame. That's sad. Man, that's sad. But fuck, man, come on, you could have done better. Alright. So this might be the last one. I don't know. I've gotten close a couple of times, but not enough. I think unless this one's particularly bad, I'll pass, but this...
Some of the anomalies the SCP Foundation deals with are dangerous.
We'll find out.
With the most powerful able to end all life, and even reality as we know it.
I like they're consistent with the depiction of demons.
And seem content to simply exist. Still others are something else entirely. SCP-4999 is a humanoid entity, though its appearance seems to fluctuate between manifestations, with the only unchanging detail being that it always is dressed in dark formal wear. Originally thought by many to be an urban legend, local tales of SCP-4999 are what initially tipped the Foundation off to its existence, and further research indicates that there are accounts that may be referring to the appearances of 4999 throughout recorded history. Yeah, legends would be a good way to determine SCPs. With which it appears, or rather the consistent situations and types of people it appears to. From the data available,
I'm gonna guess he's death.
SCP-4999 only appears to people in a very specific type of need, as you'll see in the case of a subject named Alex Hereford and the fateful night he experienced. The road was slippery, and Alex was driving too fast. He knew
someone to watch over us, someone so they don't die alone.
And to care about it. Rain hammered on the front windshield. The weak headlights of his 2005 Honda Civic barely punching into the thick, black night ahead of him. Winding through the mountainside, the road was mostly empty, save for the very occasional twin beams of light blazing past him due to his high speed. It was hard to hear the honking of angry horns over the heavy pounding of the rain. Then it happened. In a way, Alex knew it was inevitable. His tread-worn wheels finally lost contact with the ground, thick layer of rainwater between them and asphalt betraying his speeding vehicle's grip on the road and sending it careening out of control. He had expected fear, but instead felt nothing really. A slight sense of anticipation, like wincing
sign of depression.
Lands in that childhood game of hitting each other on the arm. It wasn't that the world had slowed down, but perhaps his brain was simply working at a much greater velocity now, recognizing its own impending death. His speed of thought seemed magnified to the point of slowing his perception down. He heard of soldiers in war zones experiencing the same phenomenon, as they felt sure that in the next few seconds, they'd be dead. Alex wondered, would he smash into a tree, go off a cliff's edge? He could hardly see the forest or the terrain beyond in the thick rain and the dark of the mountain. Though he traveled this road a million times before, he had no idea where he actually was tonight. He supposed it wouldn't really matter, which it was. As usual, his thoughts turned to her, or rather, they had simply run their course and returned to the one place they always did. It wasn't like there were many other people to think about in Alex's mostly empty life. There was, and always had been, since the moment he'd met her. Mostly just her. But even Alex's heightened state of mind couldn't delay the inevitable for long.
And sad.
It would be a cliff after all, Alex thought curiously, catching a glimpse of town lights far away and below.
Oh, it is a cliff. Tree or cliff?
Into empty air, then came crashing down with a horrible roar of shattered glass and tearing metal as it tumbled down the hillside. Even over the torrential downpour, the noise of Alex's crash was significant, had anyone been around to hear it. Finally, after over 100 feet down a steep incline, the car smashed into a single thick...
Oh, it was both! Cliff and tree!
As if on cue, the rain began to let up. Slowly at first, then all of a sudden in that peculiar way that northwest torrential downpours tend to do, as if the sky had at last finished
it took its victim and then fucked off.
Inside the shattered vehicle, Alex was, incredibly, alive, at least for the time being. The airbag deployment had spared his face the worst of it, and the sturdy aluminum frame of the vehicle had given its all in protecting Alex's body from the downhill crash.
He wanted to crumple.
Modern vehicle engineering had its limits. His breath came in slow.
He wanted to crumple, which is why one of the many reasons the Cybertruck fucking sucks.
Not an improvement in his condition, but rather his body dedicating the rapidly dwindling resources at its disposal into keeping vital functions going as long as possible. Opening his eyes, Alex was surprised to find himself right side up, less surprised to look down at the shattered mess his limbs and lower body had become. Gradually, Alex's thoughts cleared, his sense of self returning after the bone-jarring drop down the steep
there's gonna be a lot of pain.
Sudden stop at the end. Looking to his right, he could see the trunk of the tree that had stopped his out-of-control tumble. Despite himself, Alex laughed, a weak, gurgling chuckle.
What else can you do?
Was the cliff and a tree.
Yep. Hey, I called it.
Focused on breathing, letting the waves of pain wash over him until his brain eventually canceled them out by injecting his broken body with adrenaline and chemicals. Everything was quiet and still after the crash and the rain, but to his surprise, he could hear something. It was faint at first, just a soft crunch of footsteps on gravel, but the sound grew louder and louder until at last, it came to a stop outside Alex's window. With every ounce of effort, Alex turned his head towards the sound. A rescuer? No, impossible. Nobody was up on this mountain, and nobody could possibly have reached him here so quickly, even if there had been. He supposed he should have been surprised, yet almost from the moment that his eyes fell on the tall, handsome figure with the casual yet fashionably cut black suit, Alex accepted him for what he was. There was no shock, no confusion. For the second time tonight, just a calm sense of acceptance. The man, probably somewhere in his mid-30s, leaned down to peer in through the window. He said nothing as he casually observed the extent of Alex's injuries. Satisfied, he laid a hand on Alex's shoulder. The grip was firm, but not painfully so, just strong enough to communicate, "I'm here with you. Things will be all right." After a slight squeeze, the figure reached inside his jacket and produced a pack of cigarettes.
I am getting close, man. Like
swift taps against his palm before removing 2 cigarettes.
I can feel my eyes welling up.
Alex nodded his head, a very small motion that exploded pain across his shattered body. "No, thank you, but that stuff will kill you." Alex smiled. The man paused for a moment, the ghost of a smile showing on his face for just a moment before disappearing. Returning the offered cigarette, the man took his own and lit it, giving Alex a good look at his face and lighted his cigarette lighter. Alex had been right. The man appeared to be somewhere in his mid to late 30s. Handsome, but not cover model, so just pleasing to the eyes. He sported short hair, carefully combed and perfectly neat. Unaffected by the slight drizzle that still fell. The more Alex looked at him, the less he could remember about the man's exact features. It wasn't that they changed in any way, but rather that he simply couldn't hold on to any details for more than a few seconds. "I'm dying, aren't I?" The figure didn't speak, nor did it nod or make any form of verbal or bodily communication. He simply looked, and Alex understood. Alex had never been particularly religious or spiritual, but in that look, he understood that there was a world beyond, and one that he would very quickly be entering into. It was as if, for the first time in his life, he was able to probe that world, reality peeling away just enough to glimpse what was beyond. Twisting paths through planes of shadow and light both, shuffling figures along the beach, and at the very center of it all, a light? No, a feeling. Love, pulsing forth like the beating heart of it all. The saints had their angels, the wicked their demons, but everyone else in between the two, they had him, a guide, someone to watch over them on their final journey. Alex coughed. It was ending soon. The man took a drag from his cigarette and removed a handkerchief from another hidden pocket, carefully dabbing away the blood around Alex's chin, then returned to his silent smoking. His vision was beginning to dim around the edges, the noises of the forest growing more and more distant. Alex knew it wouldn't be long now, but he had just one final thing to do. As he always knew they would, his thoughts returned to her, here, at the end. Once more, he turned his head towards the passenger's side seat, pain exploding across his body with the motion. There, just on the far edge of the seat, was his phone, having miraculously survived the crash. It was no good, though. Even if he'd been able to move his shattered right arm, he could never reach it with his fading strength. The smoking man took one final pull of his cigarette, putting it out on the side of the vehicle and pocketing the stub. Then he reached through the broken driver's side window, Alex catching a slight whiff of cigarette smoke blended with an unrecognizable but pleasant cologne. The man reached across Alex and grabbed the phone, pulling back and looking down at Alex's shattered right hand. After a moment, he reached down once more and put the phone in Alex's left hand. "Thank you." The words were barely a whisper. He had to concentrate now, willing the pressing darkness to part just long enough for
Hey, Chaos, I failed. Congratulations.
Once more placed his hand reassuringly on Alex's shoulder, and
I
the
failed.
darkness parted slightly.
You got me.
Just enough for what Alex needed to do. He worked the phone awkwardly with his left hand, gritting his teeth through the pain of broken fingers. Opening a new message, he scrolled down his contacts. G-H-I-J. Finally, K. He found her name at last, then began typing out a message. "I still think about you every time it rains." He moved his thumb to press send, but that's when Alex's body failed him at last, the phone tumbling out of his grasp. But the man was there to catch it. Moving blindly fast, he snatched the falling phone up and held it carefully to Alex's eyes before pressing.
This would be the one? Yeah, you got me.
For Alex to see through his fading vision, until at last, message sent, confirmed successful delivery. The rain began once more, temperamental as it always is in the Pacific Northwest. Fat, heavy raindrops fell on the scene of a terrible accident, the victim seemingly having died on impact. On his lap, though, lay his phone, and somewhere far away and far below this dark mountainside, a message notification chirped on a distant phone. SCP-4999 manifests to only one person at a time, and only when they are alone. All subjects to date have been in the final stages of a terminal illness, suffering from a life-threatening injury, or otherwise on their deathbed. It also appears that all subjects have personalities and lives that could be described as nondescript, insignificant, or otherwise unremarkable. No testing of SCP-4999 has been authorized by the Foundation due to both the difficulty in predicting where it will appear, as well as the fact that observation seems to prevent the anomaly from appearing. There are also ethical concerns, since many in the Foundation feel that SCP-4999 is providing an important service to humanity, even if it is only for those on the margins of society. and it is debated whether this should be one anomalous creature that is allowed to continue its existence. And
Like, no, agreed. Like, it's one of those ones that's like, one, it would be insanely hard just to like test, but two, it's not doing anything wrong. And three, like, you would basically have to torture someone, keeping them on the brink of life and death until he showed up. Right? It would be a wild thing. But yeah. Congratulations, you got me. Yep, that was the one that was gonna get me. I hadn't seen that one before. To be honest, again, like, one, they built up on top of each other, which was a big deal. You know, slowly building it up. But if I hadn't seen any of them before, I probably would have like broken earlier. Well, if not that I hadn't seen them, but like I had seen them, and some of them I don't remember if like I've seen those videos or if like I was aware of them, but because I knew something about them, it didn't give me quite as much. I remember the dude so much because I think that was the exact video I watched. I think I heard about the bowl from somewhere else. And here used to be dragons, because that's what it's called now, not there be dragons, it's used to be dragons. I think that one's like pretty famous amongst the thing, because it is such a sad story, right? So, but congratulations, you got me. I could send a happier one as a palate cleanser. Nah, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm good.